Hello, my name is Rachel Painter, and I'm an extension agent here in Rutherford County, Tennessee. Today we'll be talking about dendrology. Dendrology is simply the scientific study of trees. It is the field of botany dealing with the identification and classification of trees and shrubs. You can identify trees and shrubs in many different ways. Sometimes you might know them just because you recognize a certain feature of that tree or shrub. So for instance, here we have some that are probably pretty recognizable to you. In the top left, we have the seed head of the magnolia tree. In the top middle, we have the sycamore. Those are still called seeds. And in the bottom, in the right of the photo, we have the shagbark hickory. In the bottom middle, we have our river birch, identifiable easily by that bark. And then in the bottom left, we have our state tree of Tennessee, the tulip poplar. Tree identification is simply a process of elimination. Using a dichotomous key can make this pretty easy. You can walk through a series of if-then questions, and that can help you decide if your tree belongs in group A or group B, and eliminate trees along the way until you get down to the tree that you are actually looking at. This is what a simple dichotomous key might look like that is good for youth to use when identifying trees because it has photos or images like seen here with the red arrows pointing to them instead of using words that we might already recognize. So for instance, you might begin here and then you would look at your tree, say you were looking at a pine tree, and you would say this tree has needles or scale-like leaves. Yes, it does. A pine tree does. So you would look at what looks like a Christmas tree and go below to that symbol. Then it says if the needles are like this, and then it has some needle images, go to the needle, the sewing needle on page 14. So you would then flip on to page 14. So again, you have just eliminated all of the other trees that did not belong in that evergreen category or the needle-like tree category. Now we'll walk through what those might look like in person. So this is scale-like leaves, and you've probably seen these in some of your ornamental trees in your landscaping at your home. And scale-like leaves means that those leaves overlap each other like a fish scale. So some of them also might even stand up and be prickly. Some might lay down tightly over each other. Next, we have needle-like leaves. You've seen these probably on our pine trees. You can see that these are long and slender, and they get their name because they look like sewing needles or needles. They can be attached singly, or they can be attached in a cluster. Flat and broad leaves. This is the majority of our trees. They have broad leaves. They're thin and flat. They're typically longer and wider than they are thick, of course, because they're very thin and flat. And this, again, is the largest category of our trees here in Tennessee. 89% of our Tennessee forests are broadleaf trees. Within those broadleaves, we have opposite or alternate branching. So on the left here, you can see alternate branching. They go off alternately. On opposite, you have petioles that come off of that twig or that branch opposite each other at the same node. A quick trick is that there are only so many opposite trees that typically grow here in Tennessee. So if you see an opposite branching structure, you would know that it is more than likely going to fall in the mad horse category. So within that, that is just an acronym to remember maple, ash, dogwood, and horse chestnut. Again, these are the major trees that fall in that opposite branching category, but there are more. So if you're outside of Tennessee and you see opposite branching category type tree arrangements, then you would know that they might fall in some of these others as well. Simple versus compound. Simple means that a singular leaf comes off of that one petiole, which is attached straight to the twig. Compound means that there are leaflets that are all attached to the same petiole, which is then attached to the twig. On the left, we have simple, and on the right, we have compound. This is also a compound leaf. You can see here, it looks like there might be multiple leaves in this picture, but these are actually called leaflets. So leaflets are all attached here to the main petiole, which is then attached to that twig. On a simple leaf, we have different leaf parts. So you can name these characteristics of this leaf so that you can further identify it. So here we have the leaf margin, which is what goes all the way around the outside of the leaf. We have the leaf veins, which is what is inside. We have the blade, which is the entire leaf from the base to the apex. We have the petiole, which is again what attaches that leaf to the twig. We have an axial bud and a stipule. Compound leaf parts. Again, we have leaflets that are attached to the petiole. The distance between the different leaflets or the petioles is called the rachis. So from the base of the bottom leaflet all the way to the apex is called the rachis. We have the petiole, which attaches again to the bud to the twig. Leaf margins, we have smooth and serrated. On the left, you can see the tulip poplar has a smooth margin, and on the right, the eastern cottonwood is serrated like a saw blade. Leaf shapes. We have lobes, which over here on our white oak on the left, you can see those lobes are kind of like your ears, and they stick out and then they come back. Entire means that there are no lobes. Sinuses are the gaps between lobes. So here you can see that this maple has deep sinuses. A pin oak also has deep sinuses, which means that that gap between those lobes emerges towards the main midvein. So you can see there the sinus is very deep because it approaches that midvein. On the right with the red oak, those are very shallow sinuses. Bristle-tipped lobes. Over here on the left, we have our red oaks, which have bristle tips. Our white oaks are smooth. So the lobes with the bristles are typically in your red oak family. And again, you can remember that because the bristles on the end look like tiny needles, and needles draw blood, which is red. So red oak. Leaf base symmetry. You can see here on the left, the red bud is symmetrical. Most leaves are symmetrical at their base. So if you folded this leaf in half at the midvein, then you would know that this is a symmetrical leaf, and both sides are proportional and equal to each other. Asymmetrical leaves, like our elms, are not proportional. So if you folded this one in half, you could obviously see that the left side of this leaf would be larger than the right. Vein patterns. These can tell you a lot about what type of tree this might be. You have different vein patterns. You can see here, pinnate, single major vein from the base straight to the margins. Palmate means it spreads out in all directions. Parallel means that there are several main veins that run from the base to the tip. And then of course there's netted, which is what a lot of leaves are. Vein patterns. This is a different one. This is called arcuate. And this is on one of our very common trees here in Tennessee, known as the dogwood. You can see that here on the right. So again, that is very significant because we know that the arcuate is just basically a dogwood here in Tennessee. Texture of leaves. We have pubescent. On the bottom of the leaves here, you can see these tiny hairs. And then there's also glabrous leaf textures, and that just means that it's smooth. So if there's no leaves present, how do you identify a tree? There are many other ways that you can identify a tree, including the buds, the bark, the branches, and even the fruits. All trees have buds, and those are very distinct to their species. In the fall and the winter is the very best time to identify the tree by its buds because they are larger. I mean, you can see them, they have not opened up yet. Can you identify this one by its buds? This is known as a tulip poplar, and it looks like a duckbill. Another easy to identify bud is the beech tree. And I like to remember that the beech tree screeches. So if you imagine that these were scratching on a chalkboard, that's just an easy way to remember that this is a beech tree. it would screech. Buds. We have our magnolia and our dogwood tree buds. Over here on the left, you see the magnolia buds are fuzzy. And on the right, the dogwoods look like tiny mushrooms, and they will always be on the very top of that branch reaching towards the sky. The buds in the Jugglandaceae family, the hickory, the pecan, the bitternut, and the walnut, so those that create a nut, looks like a monkey face, and you can see that is right below the leaf scar. So it's right below the bud. So here we have that bud coming out of that twig or that branch, and you can see here it kind of looks like a face. The bark can also be an easy way to identify a tree once you learn what you're looking at. The bark can change though as the tree ages. So the bark of a young tree might look a little bit different than that of a more mature. So you can see here on the right in these photos, on the top is a young tulip poplar tree, and on the bottom, that diamond pattern of the tulip poplar bark has gotten more depth to it, and it looks a little bit different. So when you're looking at a tree, make sure you are taking into account how old it might be. Here's some other easy to identify barks. And even though the barks might look completely different, that might mean that they're very closely related though. So just because they might not look the same, they could still be closely related. Here on the left, we have the hornbeam, and on the right, we have the hop hornbeam. So it's easy to get confused with names, but these look nothing alike. The river birch on our left looks very similar though to our sycamore, and they are not related at all. So you can see here the river birch has a little bit more of a red tinge to it than the sycamore, but just be sure that when you are identifying trees, you need to look at how this bark especially comes off of the tree. So this river birch comes off in pretty much every direction. The sycamore bark only comes off of the white bark on the tops and the bottoms. So it would be like you could rip it off going up or down. For branching patterns that can also help you identify a tree. Here we obviously know that this is a crepe myrtle because of its distinct branching pattern. Branches here on the left, you can see our redbud, and their distinct branching pattern is a zigzag pattern. So you can see here, if you trace that branch up, you can see it zigzags back and forth to its next nodes. On the dogwood, you can see again, these buds are going upright towards the sky. Here on the left, we have a pin oak, and it has a very distinct branching pattern in that the upward facing branches on the very top of the tree face directly upwards. In the middle, they are stretched straight out, and on the bottom, they are going downwards. So it looks like a star if you could draw, or a snowflake if you could draw that over the top of that tree. For the fruits, there are many different types of fruits, and other things are actually considered fruits that you might not think of as a fruit. So acorns, samaras, and legumes are all considered fruits because they have seeds inside. Drupes have one seed surrounded by flesh, as you can see here in this photo. So that's called a drupe. Berries are the same thing, except for they have more than one seed inside. So if there's lots of seed inside, it's a berry. There's one seed inside, it's a drupe. This is again considered fruit that you might not think of. And of course, on our oaks, those are the ones that create acorns. On the left, we have a sawtooth oak, which looks shaggy. And on the right, we have a shingle oak, which is a very tight cupping oak acorn. Here are different types of acorns. So you can see here that there are many different types of acorns, and even if it's the dead of winter and you can't find any leaves around, if you can still find some acorns on the ground, then that might help you identify what kind of oak that is. For fruits, you can see here on the left a legume, and that is a redbud. And on the right, we have a winterberry holly. And again, those are drupes because they only have one seed inside. Flowers. All trees actually bloom. You just might not realize it because there might not be as showy of a flower on that tree. When you're driving down the highway, you can see red blooms on a maple. So you can see here early on in the very beginning of spring, as these trees are emerging from the depths of winter, you can see here that their blooms are red. And then there might be some that are more obvious, like this Sawtooth Oak, which was definitely misplaced in the middle of a campus because all of these flowers are going to drop and make a mess. Some other flowers that are really pretty that can help you identify a tree easily are our dogwood. Again, you can see here that beautiful bloom that is very distinctive. And on the right, we have a different type of dogwood, or Cornelian cherry dogwood, and it's very yellow. Here's another example of different flowers that might help you identify a tree. On the left, we have the fringe tree, which if you were closer, you could see it does look very fringe-like. And on the right, we have the red buckeye, and those are very distinctive flowers as well. So maybe you didn't understand a lot of that, and maybe you didn't recognize a lot of those trees, and that's perfectly okay, because it takes a long time to get comfortable with identifying trees. Again, you're typically trying to look for a characteristic that sets it apart from everything else. So what makes this tree different from others? And simply, practice makes perfect. So right here, we have an example. We have leaves that are broad leaves, right? They are non-needle-like. They are branching in an alternate leaf pattern. They are simple leaves, and they are entire, right? They do not have any lobes. And the margin is smooth. So if you were using a dichotomous key, you could work your way down through all of those options and find out that this is a red bud. Example 2, these leaves are also broadleaves. They are non-needle-like. They are branching in an alternate leaf pattern. They are simple leaves, and they are lobed, right? They have deep sinuses as well. The margins are smooth, and they also have bristle tips. So if you'll remember back to our little way to remember that, these bristle tips means that it's in the red oak family. And this is called our southern red oak, Quercus falcata. So if you had a dichotomous key, this is what it might look like. And this is a very simple version of a dichotomous key. You can get very extensive ones that are entire books, or you can get simple ones like this. And here you would go through these options. So you'll start with your ones. You'll see here you have leaf compound or a leaf simple. So if you were looking here at this tree, you would say that this is a simple leaf because each leaf, as you can see there, pick out a leaf and look at it, you can see that that petiole attaches straight to the twig by itself. There's not a multitude of leaflets. So again, we're starting with our number 1. We say that it's simple. Then we move on to the next option right underneath that one that we chose. So we will say, is it opposite or alternate? You can see here this is alternate because they alternate which side they come off of. So leaf alternate. Now we'll go on to our next option, number 11. It is entire or lobed. Obviously this one is lobed. It has very deep sinuses. So you can see here we'll move on to our 15s because it is lobed. On number 15, we say, is it coarsely serrated or is it smooth? It is smooth. It is not jagged like a saw. There are bristle tips on the end, but it does not look like a saw all the way around that leaf. So it is smooth. Now we'll move on to our 18s because that's directly under that option. Oh, our 17s. So it is smooth. Then we go on to, is it a leaf with 3 to 5 lobes or is it a leaf with 7 to 9? Let's count. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Some of these leaves have 3, like the one on the far left. So we'll go with leaf with 3 to 5 lobes. Now we'll go on to the 18s. Are they bristle tips or do they lack bristle tips? These have bristle tips, right? So with our bristle tips, now we move on to 19. Is the leaf base flattened or is it obtuse? Obtuse means that it is sticking out like this. If it was flat, it would be going straight across. So this one is obtuse. So that tells us that this is a southern red oak. So again, this is the way that you can work through this. And we went through that very quickly, but you can take as much time as you need to when you're looking at a tree, looking at these leaves, and trying to decide what it is. So again, just walk through those options. And again, all you're trying to do is just eliminate all of these other options. So by going through each of those steps, we decided that it was not the other options above it, right? And if you need some more help with that, the university extension offices have some help for you. There are also some great resources online, so you can go to these options or just type in Dendrology, tree identification, and you'll have plenty of resources online. We also have a great publication called a pocket guide. You can see that here. You can get a copy of this from your extension office or look it up online as well. And I think that that's a great resource for all of us here in Tennessee. And I'll leave you with a quote, just some inspiration. It's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. So I hope you'll go outside and explore and find some trees to identify and just have some fun in nature. Again, my name is Rachel Painter with the Rutherford County Extension Office, and here's my email if you have any questions or want to know where you can get some of these resources. I'd be happy to help.